Have you ever questioned the very foundation of religion? Throughout human history, religion has shaped civilizations, inspired art, and governed morality. But what if the core premise of these institutions, the existence of God, is nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion? In this video, we'll explore the billion-dollar lie of religion and examine the evidence that challenges the very idea of God's existence. Grab your seat because this conversation will make you question everything you thought you knew. 2 billion people worship him. Countless wars have been fought in his name. For over 2 millennia, his teachings have shaped civilizations. Yet beneath the layers of faith, tradition, and reverence lies a profound and puzzling question: did Jesus of Nazareth actually exist? Welcome to a historical investigation that dares to challenge the accepted narrative. Together, we'll peel back the layers of what we think we know to examine the evidence, or, as we'll see, the surprising gaps in it. Why are an increasing number of historians and scholars questioning what billions take for granted? This isn't just a theological debate, it's a journey into the heart of history, where we follow the evidence wherever it may lead. Through ancient texts, archaeological discoveries, and a deep dive into the turbulent world of first-century Palestine, we'll uncover insights that could reshape our understanding of Christianity's origins. How do historians piece together the past? What happens when the evidence doesn't align with the story we've all been told? Consider the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, where hundreds of bishops gathered under Emperor Constantine. They faced a critical dilemma: how to reconcile Christianity's monotheistic roots with the growing belief in Jesus' divinity. Their solution, the doctrine of the Trinity, became one of Christianity's most influential and controversial concepts. But here's a curious fact: nowhere in the Bible does Jesus explicitly claim to be God. The term Trinity doesn't appear in any biblical text, despite its central role in Christian theology. Take the Gospel of John, for instance. Jesus says, "The Father is greater than I," John 14 verse 28. This statement directly challenges the concept of co-equal persons in the Trinity, creating a theological paradox that has troubled believers and theologians for centuries. The contradictions between scripture and doctrine, logic and faith, are profound. Join me on this journey as we sift through the historical record, challenge long-held assumptions, and ask, what do we really know about Jesus? And more importantly, what happens when the evidence tells a different story than the one we've been taught? For centuries, theologians and philosophers have grappled with a profound and perplexing claim: that God is simultaneously 3 distinct persons and one unified being. That Jesus is fully God and fully human, both created and uncreated, mortal and immortal. This idea seems to defy the fundamental principle of non-contradiction: something cannot be both A and not A at the same time and in the same way. Yet this paradox lies at the heart of one of Christianity's most central doctrines, the Trinity. When we examine the historical development of the Trinity, its human origins become clear. In the first 3 centuries of Christianity, there was no consensus about Jesus' nature. Believers held a wide spectrum of views. The Christian Trinity appears to follow this pattern, adapting pre-existing concepts rather than introducing an entirely new revelation. Even more striking is the Trinity's absence from Jewish theology, the religious tradition Jesus was born into and practiced. Jewish monotheism, which Jesus himself affirmed, stands in stark contrast to the complex metaphysics of the Trinity. If Jesus truly revealed a triune God, why is this fundamental truth completely missing from Judaism? Theological gymnastics to defend the Trinity began almost immediately. Augustine famously wrote, "If you comprehend it, it is not God." This retreat into mystery, declaring the doctrine beyond human understanding, feels less like a profound insight and more like a shield against logical criticism. The Trinity's problems extend beyond logic and history into practical theology. How can Jesus be both the sender and recipient of prayers? How can the Son be eternally begotten yet co-eternal with the Father? These are not just abstract questions, they challenge the very foundations of one of Christianity's most enduring doctrines. The contradictions within the doctrine of the Trinity have led some modern theologians to propose radical reinterpretations, or even to abandon it entirely. What these contradictions reveal is a pattern we'll encounter repeatedly in our investigation: human beings grappling with profound religious experiences, crafting complex theological systems, and then declaring those systems to be divine truth. The Trinity doesn't emerge as a divinely revealed mystery, but as a human attempt to resolve theological conflicts, an attempt that raises more questions than it answers. Far from being a divine revelation, the story of the Trinity serves as a cautionary tale, illustrating how religious doctrines often evolve through political necessity, cultural influence, and the human desire to systematize beliefs. It's a striking example of how Christianity's core doctrines were shaped not by divine origin, but by the influences of Greek philosophy and Roman politics. As we continue our investigation, keep this pattern in mind. The transformation of a Jewish prophet into part of a divine Trinity offers crucial insights into how religious ideas evolve and how human institutions shape what are claimed to be divine truths. This understanding will be vital as we explore other key aspects of the Jesus story. At the heart of Christian theology lies a narrative so familiar that we rarely pause to question its underlying logic. An all-powerful, all-loving God demands the brutal execution of his own Son to forgive humanity's sins. This story, central to Christian salvation theology, raises profound ethical and logical questions that deserve careful examination. Consider the fundamental premise. God creates humans with the capacity to sin, establishes rules he knows they will break, and then demands a blood sacrifice for forgiveness. This creates an immediate logical paradox. Why would an omnipotent being create a situation that requires such a dramatic and violent solution to a problem of his own making? It's akin to a parent deliberately setting their child up to fail, only to punish themselves to forgive that failure. The ethical issues grow even starker when we examine the concept of divine justice presented in this narrative. In human legal systems, punishing an innocent person for another's crimes is universally recognized as a grave injustice. Yet Christian theology upholds this very principle as the foundation for salvation. These questions strike at the heart of the narrative itself. Is this story an expression of divine wisdom, or a human attempt to reconcile a deeply flawed system of belief? Christianity presents a startling paradox: the punishment of the innocent Jesus for humanity's sins is upheld as the ultimate expression of divine love and justice. But this raises a deeply troubling question. If human justice systems reject punishing the innocent as unethical, how can divine justice be built on this very principle? Looking deeper into the historical and cultural context reveals something even more fascinating. The idea of a dying and rising God who sacrifices himself for humanity's benefit wasn't unique to Christianity. Long before Jesus, Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures worshipped deities like Osiris, Attis, Adonis, and Dionysus, gods who suffered violent deaths and returned to life, their sacrifices believed to bring blessings to humanity. Consider Mithraism, a mystery religion popular among Roman soldiers, with striking parallels to Christianity. Mithras was said to have been born of a virgin on December 25, had 12 followers, performed miracles, died for humanity's sins, and was resurrected 3 days later. His followers celebrated a sacred meal of bread and wine symbolizing his body and blood. These similarities are too numerous to dismiss as coincidence. Then there's the question of timing. Why did God wait thousands of years after humanity's fall to implement this supposed plan of salvation? Biblical figures like Adam, Noah, and Abraham lived and died with no knowledge of this future sacrifice. Yet Christianity claims it was part of God's plan from the very beginning. This temporal disconnect suggests something unsettling: that Christian theology was retrofitted to align with pre-existing cultural narratives rather than unfolding as a divine plan throughout history. Even the mechanics of the sacrifice raise significant questions. If Jesus is God, and God is immortal, what exactly was sacrificed? According to Christian doctrine, Jesus knew he would rise again in 3 days. This foreknowledge fundamentally changes the nature of the sacrifice. Can we genuinely call it a sacrifice if the being in question is immortal and fully aware that death is temporary? Furthermore, why would an omnipotent God require any sacrifice at all to forgive sins? Human parents forgive their children without demanding a blood payment. Are we to believe that God, in his infinite power and love, is somehow less capable of forgiveness? These questions don't just challenge the narrative, they challenge the very logic of the theology itself. Was the sacrifice truly an act of divine love, or was it a concept shaped by human cultural influences and the need to align with familiar mythological patterns? Is God, the creator of the universe, less capable of unconditional forgiveness than humans? This unsettling idea arises from the doctrine of substitutionary atonement, which portrays God as bound by a peculiar system of cosmic accounting. According to this doctrine, sin creates a debt that can only be paid with blood, a concept that raises profound theological and ethical questions. Curiously, this idea is absent from the Jewish theology from which Christianity emerged. Instead, it closely mirrors pagan practices of appeasing gods through sacrifice. Are we to believe that an all-powerful deity operates within a system more reflective of human cultural traditions than divine wisdom? The ethical implications are equally troubling. If sins can be wiped away through the suffering of an innocent party, what does this teach about justice and personal accountability? This doctrine seems to promote ethical outsourcing, where responsibility for one's actions can be transferred to another, a principle we universally reject in human behavior and legal systems. Historical and archaeological evidence further complicates the sacrifice narrative. First-century Palestinian Jewish texts show no expectation of a Messiah who would suffer and die for humanity's sins. This concept only appears to develop later, as Christianity spread into Gentile territories, where myths of dying and rising gods were common. This geographical and cultural evolution suggests something profound. The story of Jesus' sacrifice may have been adapted to fit existing mythological frameworks rather than unfolding as divine revelation. There's also an emotional aspect to this narrative that warrants scrutiny. By presenting Jesus' death as an act for which humanity is eternally responsible, and for which we must feel undying gratitude, the story creates a powerful psychological dynamic of guilt and obligation. This emotional leverage has been used throughout history to control behavior and demand adherence to religious authority. Far from a divine mystery, this dynamic reveals a deeply human mechanism for maintaining power and influence. Was the sacrifice truly an act of divine love, or a human-crafted narrative designed to resonate with cultural norms and exert psychological control? This emotionally charged narrative of Jesus' sacrifice is often presented as divine truth, but when examined critically, it reveals a dynamic wrapped in divine packaging. The gap between the claimed cosmic significance of the event and its observable outcomes suggests a narrative that promises far more than it delivers. The violent nature of the sacrifice also raises profound ethical concerns. Why would a God of love choose such a brutal method for reconciliation? The glorification of suffering implicit in the crucifixion narrative has, throughout history, been used to justify martyrdom, self-sacrifice, and even violence, sometimes with tragic consequences. This seems less like the wisdom of a divine being and more like a reflection of human tendencies toward drama, violence, and spectacle. Like the Trinity, it represents another human attempt to make sense of existence through religious frameworks, rather than the unfolding of a genuine divine plan. This critical examination of Jesus' sacrifice leads us naturally to the next chapter in the story, the resurrection. The resurrection of Jesus is Christianity's cornerstone. Without it, as Paul boldly declares, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. Yet when we approach the resurrection with historical rigor, we uncover a web of inconsistencies, logical challenges, and significant gaps in evidence. What will we find when we unravel this story? The resurrection of Jesus, Christianity's cornerstone, is often presented as a historical certainty. Yet, when examined closely, it reveals a tapestry of contradictions, inconsistencies, and historical improbabilities that challenge this foundational claim. Even the locations of Jesus's appearances vary significantly, shifting between Galilee and Jerusalem, two places separated by a substantial journey. The sequence of events after the resurrection is equally muddled. Paul's account in 1 Corinthians 15, written earlier than the Gospels, provides a list of appearances that doesn't align with the Gospel narratives. Strangely, Paul's list omits critical moments, such as Jesus's dramatic appearance to Mary Magdalene, later celebrated as the Apostle to the Apostles. How could Paul, writing closer to the events, be unaware of such significant details? The guard story seems less like historical reporting and more like a later apologetic addition aimed at countering doubts about the resurrection. Then there's the reaction of Jesus's followers. If they had truly witnessed their leader miraculously return from the dead, one would expect immediate and bold proclamations of such an extraordinary event. Yet early Christian documents reveal a community struggling to understand what had happened. Paul's letters, the earliest Christian writings, reveal significant conflict over the nature of the resurrection itself. In 1 Corinthians 15 verse 12, Paul addresses some believers who outright deny the possibility of bodily resurrection. Furthermore, Paul never mentions an empty tomb or describes physical encounters with Jesus. Instead, he speaks of resurrection appearances using the Greek word "oth," the same term he uses to describe his own vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus. This suggests that early resurrection experiences were understood as spiritual visions, not physical encounters. The first-century Mediterranean world was steeped in resurrection stories. Egyptian, Greek, and Roman traditions abounded with tales of gods, heroes, and even ordinary individuals returning from the dead. The Roman historian Herodotus noted how common such claims were. Even Apollonius of Tyana, a contemporary of Jesus, was said to have appeared to his followers after death. These cultural parallels suggest that the resurrection story of Jesus emerged in a society primed to accept such narratives, rather than as an unprecedented divine event. The Gospels describe dramatic phenomena accompanying Jesus's death and resurrection: earthquakes, midday darkness, the temple curtain tearing, and even saints rising from their graves to walk the streets of Jerusalem. Yet, no contemporary historian or source mentions these events. This silence is particularly striking given that several historians of the time, including Josephus and Tacitus, documented far less significant occurrences in Judea. The political context of the Roman world cannot be overlooked in examining the resurrection story. In an empire where emperors claimed divine status and even their own resurrections, early Christians had every motivation to portray Jesus as superior to these imperial figures. The evolution of resurrection narratives parallels the Church's growing need to assert authority and compete with the imperial cult for influence and legitimacy. Modern apologetics often highlight what they call the embarrassing elements of the resurrection accounts, such as women being the first to discover the empty tomb, as evidence of authenticity. However, this argument misses a critical point. Mary Magdalene's role might reflect an early, more egalitarian phase of Christianity rather than historical accuracy. Over time, as the Church became more hierarchical, Mary's prominence was progressively diminished, and her role reinterpreted to fit evolving theological agendas. The theological debates and challenges faced by early Christians also shaped how resurrection beliefs developed. For instance, as Christianity expanded into Gentile territories, the idea of a physical resurrection became more pronounced. This shift wasn't about preserving historical memory but rather about countering Gnostic movements, which denied Jesus's physical nature. The increasingly detailed and physical descriptions of the resurrection in later Gospels reflect these internal theological battles rather than an accurate record of events. Even the tradition of the empty tomb raises questions. Jewish burial customs of the time included a practice of secondary burial, where bones were collected and placed in an ossuary about a year after death. If Jesus's tomb had been found empty due to this common custom, it's plausible that early Christians interpreted this as a sign of resurrection, later elaborating the story into a more miraculous account. Human psychology also plays a role. Grief-induced visions and vivid experiences of deceased loved ones are well-documented phenomena across cultures. The disciples, devastated by Jesus' execution and grappling with their dashed apocalyptic hopes, would have been particularly vulnerable to such experiences. Over time, individual visions could have merged into more concrete resurrection traditions. The political implications of resurrection claims cannot be ignored. As Christianity spread and sought to establish itself in a world dominated by competing beliefs, the resurrection narrative offered a powerful theological and emotional cornerstone. It provided a compelling way to distinguish Jesus from other figures and to solidify the growing movement.
Welcome to Blessovia Science TV, where we take you on an exhilarating journey through the cosmos and unravel the mysteries of science. We are excited to offer you the opportunity to become a valued member of our ever-growing community of cosmic enthusiasts and knowledge seekers. Exclusive access to cosmic content. As a member of Blessovia Science TV, you will gain exclusive access to a treasure trove of cosmic content, including documentaries, interviews with leading scientists, space missions updates, and awe-inspiring visualizations of the universe, live Q, and sessions with experts. Your membership will grant you the chance to participate in live Q and sessions with renowned scientists, astronomers, and space explorers. Get your burning questions answered by those who push the boundaries of human knowledge. Embark on a journey that spans the cosmos and join us in unraveling the secrets of the universe. Become a Blessovia Science TV member today, and together we will reach for the stars. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to leave your comment.